The day Chihung returned to the capital to fulfill our marriage contract, he brought with him a beautiful, delicate woman. He said, "Chinguan, you come from a distinguished family, graceful and well-mannered. Surely, you can accept Chiyu." On the spot, I tore up our marriage contract and left without looking back, marrying someone else. Later, he chased after my wedding procession on horseback, but I never once turned to look. Chihung and I grew up together, like childhood friends. I had always believed that we were well-matched, destined to be together forever. But when he came back to the capital to fulfill our marriage contract, he brought with him a delicate and pitiful woman, Chiyu. Since I received his letter, I had been eagerly awaiting his return. I stood at the city gate early that day, hoping that he would see me first. "Chinguan, what are you doing here?" When he saw me, there was no surprise in his eyes, only a forced smile and a hint of panic. I just stared at the carriage behind him. A soft hand reached out from inside, followed by a sweet voice saying, "Cousin, could you help me down?" Only then did Chihung realize, glancing at me with some unease before going over to help the woman out. We had grown up together, promised to each other since childhood, and our feelings for each other were understood without needing to be stated. But here I was, eagerly waiting for him to return and marry me, only to see him arrive with a woman in his carriage. He helped the woman down and brought her over to me. The woman walked with a delicate grace, her pale face exuding an air of frailty and vulnerability. "You must be cousin Chiheng's fiancée, Miss Chinguan," she said. "I'm Chuyu, his cousin." Chuyu seemed to be a name that suited her well. I stared at Chihung, waiting for an explanation. But Chihung avoided my gaze and said, "Chinguan, my cousin just lost her parents and is greatly affected by the loss. She is in poor health and should not be exposed to the wind here. Let me take her back to the manor first, and then I'll come visit you at the Shun household. Is that all right?" "That works." Chihung looked as though he'd been given a reprieve, helping Chuyu into the carriage before leaving. I stood silently at the city gate, watching as their carriage grew smaller and disappeared into the distance. A sudden feeling of unease washed over me, like when I was a child playing hide-and-seek with Chihung and couldn't find him, that feeling of emptiness. Chihung did not come to see me at the Shun household until after midday. Because the Shun and Chi families had been close for many years, the household staff were familiar with him, and so he had no trouble reaching my courtyard. I was sitting idly beneath the phoenix tree when Chihung arrived in front of me, holding a box of osmanthus cakes from Shuani Lu, which I loved. "Eat while it's still warm," he said. I just queued up to buy them, but I did not take the cakes. Instead, I stood up and looked directly at him. "Chihung, I didn't say anything earlier when your cousin was here, but now you have to explain to me. You brought her back, sat together in the same carriage, and behaved so intimately. It was nothing like the relationship between ordinary siblings. Tell me honestly, what are you planning with her?" Chihung sighed and placed the cakes on my table. "Chinguan, I mentioned in my letter that I've taken leave from my post in the capital to marry you. After our wedding, I'll take you to Qingzhou, where we'll work together and we'll never be apart." Seeing my unwavering gaze, he hesitated before continuing. "My aunt married into Qingzhou. She and my uncle both passed away recently, leaving only my cousin Chiyu alone and without family. Before she passed, my aunt knew about my marriage contract and asked me to take Chiyu as a concubine, swearing that I would care for her for the rest of her life. Chinguan, you come from a noble family, you are graceful and well-mannered. Surely, you can accept Chiyu." I listened patiently as he explained, and when he finished, he looked at me earnestly, almost making me laugh in frustration. But I, Chinguan, have too much pride to accept this. I barely held back my tears and spoke through clenched teeth. Upon hearing this, Chihung seemed anxious. Without regard for propriety, he stepped forward and grabbed my sleeve. "Chinguan, we grew up together, you know me. I only see her as a sister. I only promise my aunt. Yes, I've never doubted our feelings for each other. Even after a tiring journey, you didn't forget to buy me my favorite osmanthus cakes." I glanced at the cakes on the table, now cooling. But during the moment you were talking to me just now, were you worried that I would misunderstand? Or were you concerned about your sick cousin? Chihung released my sleeve, falling silent. I turned my back to him, took a deep breath, and forced down the tears. Chihung, I always speak my mind. Now, I'm telling you, between you and me, you can only choose one. I finally turned around to face him. There are many ways to fulfill your oath. If you want to find a good future for your cousin and only remain her brother, then I'll still be your fiancé. After we marry, I'll take care of her too. But if you insist on making her your concubine, then our engagement is off. Although Chihung had explained that he only promised his dying aunt to take Chuyu as a concubine to care for her, they were still blood relatives. If he made her his concubine, I would always have a thorn in my heart for the rest of my life. After Chihung left, my personal maid, Yulan, was furious on my behalf. Chihung really overestimates himself. Our young miss is from a noble family. We only tolerated him because of the marriage contract and the friendship we had growing up. Does he think that without him, our young miss can't find a suitable husband? Though I told Yulan not to say too much, I agreed with her words. Even though I had expressed my stance to Chihung, my heart no longer felt the same. A faint sadness had settled within me. What I said to him was my final opportunity for him and for the bond we shared growing up. Now, it's up to him to see if he can seize this chance. A few days later, Chihung finally came to the Shun residence again. But my ominous premonition turned out to be true. Chinghuan, I'm sorry. I've spoken to my cousin, and I've decided to find her another suitor. He looked pained as he said, who would have thought that she would hold a hairpin to her neck, threatening to end her life, saying that if I don't want her, she'll die. Chinghuan, I'm begging you, please, I don't have a mother anymore, and my cousin is now one of the few relatives I have left. Please, let her be a concubine with just a nominal status, and she will serve you from now on, please. I slowly stood up and gazed into his eyes, which were filled with sorrow. Chihung, I, Shin Chinghuan, am your fiancé. How is it that now, when you speak like this, I seem like the villain, forcing your cousin to death? Serve me? Do you really expect me to let your cousin serve me? I sighed deeply. When I have a conflict with her, will you side with me or with her? Chinghuan, she wouldn't do that. He tried to explain further, but I had already turned away, not looking at him again. Then, Chihung, you've already made your choice, haven't you? I lowered my head and said softly, I will tell my father, and our engagement will be annulled. Scoundrel. The Shun and Chi families have been friends for decades, and your engagement was arranged by your late grandmother. How dare you change it so easily? Father, holding the family punishment stick, lashed it across my body. Though I was in pain, I kept my head down, silent. Chihung is kneeling at the door, and you don't care about him at all? Father glanced out the window, then glared at me with fury. Father, he's kneeling to make me accept his cousin, not to beg me. I said firmly, unwilling to change my mind. Shunbo, please don't hit Chinghuan, it's all my fault. Chiheng's voice came from outside the window. I looked up and gazed at Father. Father, the ancestors have decreed that after receiving 20 lashes, if one doesn't change their mind, it shows steadfastness, which should fulfill the request of the person. Please, Father, lash me 20 times and annul my engagement with Chihung. You. Father angrily continued to strike me, but I remained silent, bearing the blows without a word. I heard Chiheng's voice, filled with deep despair. Chinghuan, why? Are you really going to sever all ties with me? I no longer had the strength to respond. Even though Father was somewhat lenient, after the 20 lashes, I still fainted from the pain. I remained unconscious for 2 days. When I woke up, my mother was sitting before me, her eyes filled with tears. I've already spoken to your father and confiscated his private savings. I weakly smiled. Father had no choice. Suddenly saying he wanted to break off the engagement naturally made him angry with the Chi family. You should have told me earlier, she said, her face filled with discontent. That Chihung, I had always seen him as a son due to his mother's early death. Is he a fool from his official position, making a cousin a concubine before marriage? Who is he trying to disgust? She tightly grasped my hand, offering comfort. Don't worry, even though the Shun and Chi families are closely connected, it's still Chihung who has wronged us first. This marriage, we're calling it off. After saying that, she noticed my troubled expression and added, Tomorrow, I'll find some of the best young men in the capital for you. You can choose as you like. The daughter of the prestigious Minister of Revenue. Do you think she won't find a good match? I nodded and forced a smile for my mother. From then on, the boy I had grown up with and shared innocent memories with would no longer be part of my life. Perhaps my mother had hinted at it because soon after, someone came to speak on my behalf. I was somewhat irritated and just wanted to avoid these matters, so I told my mother I needed to go out more often. My mother, worried I was upset, always agreed. So after my whip marks healed, I went out frequently with my good friend, Princess Chun-Ning, to shop and have tea. One day, at the largest jewelry shop in the capital, we saw Chihung and his cousin Chuyu, whom I hadn't seen in over a month. Princess Chun-Ning, being her usual outspoken self, couldn't help but exclaim, Chinguan, isn't that your? I quickly covered her mouth, but it was too late. Chihung had already spotted me. His eyes brightened, and regardless of Chuyu standing next to him, he walked toward me. Chinguan, what are you doing here? Princess Chun-Ning already answered for me. What's wrong? Since Chinguan broke off the engagement with you, does she have to stay at home and be sad, not allowed to go out and relax? Chinguan, that's not what I meant. Chihung hurriedly turned to me, trying to explain. I glared at Chun-Ning as a warning, and she mischievously stuck her tongue out. Chi Gongzi, please excuse her. She's just straightforward. Don't take it to heart. Chi Gongzi? Chinguan, have you grown so distant from me? Chiheng's eyes were filled with disappointment. I gave him a cold glance, unwilling to speak further, and turned to leave. Chinguan, since we've met, let me buy you this shop's treasure as a token of apology for what happened with the family punishment. Chihung reached out to stop me. I was about to politely decline when I realized that Chuyu, without me noticing, had already stood beside him and wrapped her arm around him. Brother, you already promised me to pick some jewelry, to be my dowry. She extended her hand, pointing at a bright and lush piece of agate green. Let's use that shop treasure to make me a set of headpieces. How does that sound? Chihung was momentarily unsure how to respond, his handsome face turning red. I gave Chuyu a subtle look, and she seemed to have blushed a lot more. It seemed that Chihung treated her quite well. Princess Chun-Ning, however, couldn't hold back and laughed out loud. Chi Gongzi is talented, having placed third in the imperial exam at 19 and later promoted to the position of county magistrate in Qingzhou. With such a bright future ahead of him, it seems your cousin can't bear to let him go. Chiheng's face was as red as if it would bleed. Just then, an unpleasant voice interrupted the awkward scene. Shopkeeper, I'll take that agate green. Wrap it up for me. I turned to see a young man in plain clothes, but with an extraordinary and elegant air about him. Far from ordinary. Wrap it up and send it to that young lady, he smiled, pointing in my direction. A few days later, during the Wan Shou festival banquet at the palace, my mother brought me to the palace at dusk. Once the banquet began, I sat beside my mother, watching the usual performances. I felt rather uninterested. Suddenly, a young man in splendid robes walked into the hall. As he passed by me, I felt a shock. It was the same man, Su Yan. I exchanged a glance with Chun-Ning, and she also looked shocked. Your Majesty, please forgive me for being late, he said, bowing to the emperor, offering an apologetic smile. Shuyan, the last time I saw you was 10 years ago. I didn't expect you to have grown so much, the emperor said, granting him permission to rise, his face filled with emotion. I inhaled sharply. It turned out he was not Su Yan, but Zhao Shuyan, the newly inherited Duke of Huayang. The late Duke of Huayang was the emperor's elder brother, making him the emperor's nephew. After the old duke's recent death, he became the youngest feudal prince in the current dynasty. Chun-Ning looked regretful, likely recalling that she had met him 10 years ago but had forgotten who he was. This time, I've come to the capital to celebrate His Majesty's birthday. Although I'll only stay for 2 months, if I see a young lady I like, I'll request an imperial decree to make her my princess," the emperor joked with Zhao Shuyan before he took a seat. The music and dance performances soon resumed. I pushed the earlier shock from my mind and focused on my meal. Then, a young maid came over, pouring wine into my cup, but she accidentally spilled it all over my skirt. She was immediately terrified, her face pale, and she began trembling. "Miss Shin, I didn't mean to." I smiled softly and reassured her. "It's fine. I'll go change clothes in a moment. You should go serve the others. Just be more careful next time." "Yes, thank you, Miss Shin." She looked at me gratefully. I noticed an older maid nearby, likely the one in charge, had noticed the mistake. She was now glaring at the young maid with disapproval. Yulan accompanied me to the changing room. I thought for a moment and said, "Yulan, go explain things to that older maid for the young maid." After all, in the palace, even a small mistake can lead to heavy punishment. "Miss, it's getting late. If I leave you here alone, do you know the way back to the banquet?" Yulan seemed a little worried. I reassured her. "Don't worry, I'll change quickly. Go ahead. That maid will be punished for sure." There were a few people waiting to change, and by the time I was done, it was already completely dark. Without Yulan's strong sense of direction, I ended up getting lost in the palace. Feeling a little helpless, I called out tentatively, "Is anyone there?" The silence around me was overwhelming. I stumbled a few more steps, then heard a voice from a distance. "Miss Shin, are you here?" I was overjoyed and quickly called back, "Yes, I'm here." The owner of the voice approached, and it was Zhao Shuyan. He held a palace lamp in his hand and spoke kindly, "Miss Shin, it's nice to see you again." Before I could even question why he knew me or how he ended up here, I just followed him out of the area. Once we reached the main road, I curtsied slightly and said, "Thank you, Prince Huayang." He explained with a smile, "Your maid grew concerned when you didn't return and asked Chun Ning for help. I was sitting not far from her and overheard, so I told him I would look for you." Seeing the confusion on my face, he continued, "I saw you in the hall earlier and asked Chun Ning about you. She, without hesitation, told me you were the daughter of the minister of the household. I apologize for the forwardness, but I was eager to know your name." His gaze was earnest, and I instinctively stepped back, maintaining a distance. "I must thank you again, Prince Huayang. Otherwise, I would have remained lost on that narrow path," I said, feeling grateful. He seemed slightly embarrassed by my repeated thanks. "No need. It was just a small effort." As we walked back, he noticed my still uneasy expression and brought up a new topic. "Miss Shin, have you ever been to Huayang?" I shook my head. "No, I haven't. Huayang has flowers blooming all year round, and the landscape is beautiful. It's a perfect place to live." When he mentioned his fief, Zhao Shuyan's face lit up with enthusiasm. I replied wistfully, "If I ever get the chance, I'd love to visit Huayang." "I hope you get that chance, Miss Shin," Zhao Shuyan said warmly. Although he was a prince, Zhao Shuyan was humble and engaging, which made me feel a bit more favorable toward him. We chatted a little more, and soon we arrived at the banquet hall. Yulan rushed to meet me, her face pale with fright as she clutched her chest. I once again curtsied to Zhao Shuyan, saying, "I must hurry back, but if I have the opportunity to meet Prince Huayang again, I'll be sure to properly thank you." He smiled faintly and replied, "I'm sure we'll meet again soon." His eyes held a slightly mischievous glint, leaving me with more questions than answers. This morning, my father unusually entered the study early, seemingly discussing matters with someone. Outside the door, several carriages, laden with extravagant gifts from the distinguished guest, were parked. I helped my mother direct the servants to unload the gifts, my curiosity growing even more. Not long after, a servant brought a potted plant of flowers into my courtyard. "This is the gift the distinguished guest specifically wanted to send to Miss, saying it is called Chihung." I took a closer look. The petals of the Chihung were pure white and flawless, a variety I had never seen before. While I was admiring it, A familiar voice came from outside the courtyard. "These are the Chihung from Huayang. Do you like them?" It was Zhao Shuyan, though he had not entered the courtyard but was standing outside. I immediately understood. So, the distinguished guest discussing matters with my father was Zhao Shuyan. No wonder he had said that we would have the chance to meet again soon. Knowing he was a man who upheld strict propriety between men and women, I raised my voice. "I greet His Royal Highness, the Prince of Huayang. You are a distinguished guest. Please enter the courtyard. Allow me to make tea and properly host you." Zhao Shuyan smiled and stepped inside at my invitation. I asked him to sit under the parasol tree and serve him a cup of tea. "I wonder, Your Highness, why have you come to the Shin residence today?" I asked softly, not realizing my own nervousness in my tone. Minister Shen has been in charge of the Ministry of Revenue for many years and understands taxation and household registration systems well. Now that I have just become a prince, I naturally asked the Emperor's permission to consult with him. After our discussion, Minister Shen kindly allowed me to stroll around the Shen residence, and I didn't expect to end up at your courtyard. Zhao Shuyan took a sip of his tea and smiled at me. "I once mentioned that Huayang has flowers blooming all year round, and now it's the season for the Chihung. Do you still find them pleasing?" I laughed softly. I had promised to thank the prince, but now that you have given me gifts and favors, I truly feel I cannot repay you enough. Your tea is aromatic, and it was personally brewed by a beauty, so that alone is a great repayment. His compliment made me lower my head, smiling shyly. As we continued chatting, an unexpected guest arrived in the courtyard. "Chinghuan, who is he? How did he end up in your courtyard?" It was Chihung, holding a box of osmanthus cakes, standing dazed at the entrance. I silently blamed myself for forgetting to instruct the servants not to let him enter the Shen residence casually. But Zhao Shuyan merely glanced at him and spoke. "Isn't this the young master from the other day who is unsure of whom to give the store's prize treasure?" "It's you. How do you know Chinghuan?" Chihung dropped the osmanthus cakes onto the ground and walked over to Zhao Shuyan, glaring at him. "Well, I should thank you for giving me the chance to meet Miss Shen, shouldn't I?" Zhao Shuyan became sharp-tongued when facing Chihung, each of his words clearly putting Chihung in his place. "Chinghuan, what is going on here?" Chihung turned to me with a helpless expression, his eyes filled with disappointment. "Chinghuan, we grew up together. Why do you prefer laughing and chatting with this person you just met rather than maintaining our bond?" I said sternly, "Chihung, be respectful. This is His Royal Highness, the Prince of Huayang." "Now I understand," he muttered, looking at me with pain in his eyes. "So, it was just an excuse with cousin Chuyu. You must have been disgusted by me being just a 7th-rank county magistrate, so you abandoned me and sought a more suitable husband. But now that I'm in charge of Qingzhou, with my outstanding achievements, promotion is just a matter of time." In his desperation, he grabbed my hand. "Chinghuan, please forgive me. I promise I will accomplish something in the court. We've known each other since we were little. Don't get angry. Just find someone to marry quickly, okay?" I was so angry, I nearly lost my composure and harshly pulled my hand away from him. At that moment, Zhao Shuyan stood up, his face cold, and stepped forward to separate us, standing between me and Chihung to protect me. "Young Master Chi, you must be cautious of propriety. Do not damage Miss Shen's reputation." His voice calling me Chinghuan startled me, and a warm feeling suddenly swept through my chest. Chihung continued to stare at me. "Chinghuan, I want to hear you speak." "Chihung, if you truly care about me, then there is nothing more to say between us." I didn't want to speak any further and turned to walk inside the house. After a long while, Zhao Shuyan must have said something to Chihung, because he was driven away, looking dejected. When I came out of the house, Zhao Shuyan noticed my gloomy expression and approached, wanting to comfort me, but not knowing how, looking quite awkward. I couldn't help but laugh. I never expected that the Prince of Huayang, who seems gentle and refined, would be so sharp-tongued. "Chihung didn't stand a chance in front of you." Zhao Shuyan smiled slyly. "For different people, one must speak differently." He walked over, picked up the crushed box of osmanthus cakes, and sighed. But this young Master Chi, since he wronged you first and now insults you like this, in my eyes, you should have never been with someone like him. He looked at me with concern. I know, I replied, a bitter feeling rising within me. After all, it was the bond we shared since childhood, and now it was falling apart in such a painful way. It truly hurt my heart. But since Chihung had said those things to me, it was clear that he had already cast me as a heartless person. He never saw his own fault in marrying his cousin, instead blaming me for leaving him and trying to climb higher socially. Now, I was completely done with him. Just like the broken osmanthus cakes, everything was shattered beyond repair. Since the day we visited the Su residence, Zhao Shuyan often sent various gifts. Although they were ostensibly a token of gratitude for my father's guidance, they were always specifically meant for me. Not only my mother, but even my father was quite surprised. Yulan teased me, saying, "Miss, every time you receive a gift from His Royal Highness, the Prince of Huayang, your face turns as red as an apple." I pretended to scold her, but she laughed and ran off, covering her mouth. However, just as I was daydreaming about Zhao Xuyan's gifts, my father ran into trouble. Several censors joined forces to accuse him of embezzling tax revenues, claiming the amount reached 50,000 taels of silver. I couldn't believe it. My father was always frugal, and the Shen family's lifestyle had never been extravagant. My mother was furious, saying, "I thought that even if the marriage with the Qi family was off, our bond would remain strong. Who would have thought that Qi Shiming, as the right capital protector, would be so afraid of being implicated that he wouldn't say a word to defend your father?" I felt guilty. I had been the one who unilaterally broke off the engagement, damaging the Qi family's reputation and the relationship between the Shen and Qi families. It had led to someone like Qi Yushi, who had always been close to my father, refusing to speak up for him, leaving me feeling uneasy. Although my father told me not to blame myself, these past few days, he had been summoned by the emperor for questioning, rushing back and forth between the palace and our residence. His hair had turned half white. 3 days after being summoned to the palace, my father never returned. My mother and I sent invitations to my father's former friends, but we received no responses. Don't say the world has become cold-hearted. They are only looking out for themselves, I advised my mother, trying to comfort her. My mother was anxious but didn't know what else to do, so she and I spent each day in the house, praying for my father's well-being. The once bustling Shen residence had grown quiet, and no one dared to come near. At this moment, only Zhao Shuyan sent an invitation and entered the Shen residence. I was shocked. He had originally planned to return to Huayang a few days ago. How could he be here in the Shen residence? "Don't worry, madam," Zhao Shuyan said gently. "I've already had people inquire at the palace. Minister Shen is only being temporarily housed in the palace by the emperor. There's no danger to his life." His words were like a reassurance to my mother, who sighed in relief. I quickly instructed the servants to help her rest. He then turned to me and said, "Chinguan, don't worry. I also believe your father is innocent. The emperor is a wise ruler and would never wrong anyone. I've already sent people to trace the source of this matter. Once we have results, I'll immediately submit them to the emperor. Until then, I'll remain here in the capital." Tears blurred my vision, and I could no longer express my gratitude in words. "You were originally planning to stay for only 2 months. Now that you've missed the date to return to Huayang, will this cause any inconvenience?" Zhao Shuyan stepped closer, hesitating for a moment before gently taking hold of my sleeve. Minister Shen shared his experience and wisdom with me. Now, as I help him, I am repaying a favor. This is something I must do. He lifted his gaze to look at me and pulled out a handkerchief from his sleeve, offering it to me to wipe my tears. Moreover, I haven't asked the emperor to grant a marriage between me and the girl I like, to make her my princess. How could I leave now? For a moment, I was stunned, but then I saw the playful smile on his lips, and his eyes held a clear affection. Suddenly, my heart bloomed with thousands of peach blossoms, and joy overflowed uncontrollably. We anxiously waited for another 7 days, and finally, my father returned from the palace. When he came back, he only said to my mother, who was helping him, "Let me sleep for a while. When I wake up, prepare some hot water for me." And then he collapsed into bed, falling into a deep sleep. Not long after, Zhao Xuyan came as well, though this time, he was representing the emperor to comfort the Shun residents. The emperor has said that the real culprit behind the embezzlement is someone else. Minister Shen was wrongly accused and is entirely innocent. The emperor feels guilty and has granted Minister Shen a year's worth of salary as well as several treasures. While my mother felt relieved, she still couldn't help but worry for my father. How can this small sum of silver make up for the white hairs on your father's head? I embraced my mother's shoulders. Mother, as long as he is safe and sound, that is enough. Seeing that the emperor had granted treasures and silver to comfort the Shun residents, the families who had previously rejected our invitations now sent their own. My mother resented their opportunism, muttering, "They're no better than a man who met your father just once, like the Prince of Huayang." I couldn't help but smile, thinking of Zhao Xuyan's quiet delivery of the emperor's decree and how, before leaving, he secretly slipped a letter into my hands. I opened the letter, and several pinkish-purple peony petals fell out. The letter read, "Huayang is now in full bloom with peonies. I wonder, do you like them? Also, once your father has recovered, I will come to propose marriage." After walking out of my father's study, Zhao Xuyan smiled at me, who was nervously standing by the door, and made a mouth shape as if saying it's done. I walked into the study, and my father, still in shock, spoke. "Chinguan, just now, the king of Huayang said he wanted to marry you and asked the emperor for a decree in the afternoon. When I was wronged in the palace, it was he who helped clear my name. Tell me honestly, was this because of you?" I lowered my head and didn't dare look into my father's eyes. How should I explain to him? Should I start with the jewelry store where he helped me, or the time he saved me in the palace with a palace lantern, or how he stood up for me in front of Chihung, making him leave? Perhaps it started with the pure white Huayang Chihung flower he sent me? I didn't know when my feelings for him had deepened so much. The decree arrived in the afternoon, and my mother didn't believe it at first. However, when the decree actually arrived, she had no choice but to believe it. "I told you, such a dignified prince would never help your father out of nowhere. It must be because of you, Chinguan." Then, my mother remembered that if I became the princess of Huayang, I would have to stay in Huayang with Zhao Xuyan and be far away from them for a long time. She began crying, wailing, "My health is poor, and your father, and I only have you, our only daughter. Now, you're going to be far away from us for so long, my child." Fortunately, Zhao Xuyan arrived shortly after the decree was issued. Seeing my mother's eyes full of resentment, he hurriedly suggested, "If your parents are willing, they can come to Huayang with me and stay at the king's residence." At this, my mother was finally comforted and began happily preparing my dowry. Zhao Xuyan and I were to marry in 1 month. The wedding would be held twice, once at the Shun residence and once again when we returned to Huayang. Before the wedding, the couple was not allowed to meet, but this was no trouble for Zhao Xuyan. He had already bribed Yulan to deliver passionate love poems to me. Each time I read them, my face turned bright red, and Yulan would tease me. While I was happily embroidering my wedding dress, news came that the Qi family was in trouble. Specifically, it was Chihung's concubine, Chuyu, who had caused the trouble. It was reported that she had taken all of Chihung's accumulated salary and the cash, properties, and shops from the Qi residence and fled. It turned out that her previously fragile demeanor had all been an act. Chuyu's biological mother, Chihung's aunt, had married into a poor family in Qingzhou, severing ties with her own family. After working hard for a lifetime, her husband passed away, and she died shortly afterward, leaving only her daughter, Chuyu. Having endured hardship since childhood, Chuyu was deeply grateful when Chihung, after being assigned to Qingzhou, took care of her family. She saw him as her savior. She decided to hold on to Chihung tightly, using his pity for her to force him to marry her as a concubine, even though he was already engaged. She fantasized about living a luxurious life after entering the Qi residence, wearing gold and jade and eating delicacies. But the reality was harsh. Chihung's father, the head of the Qi family, was strict and did not allow any improper behavior from his children. With Chihung soon to return to the harsh environment of Qingzhou and no extra allowance from his father, the family was struggling to make ends meet. Feeling disappointed, Chiyu took the money and fled. Chihung and his father sent many people in pursuit, but as a frail woman, Chiyu knew many places to hide. They didn't even know if she had left the capital, and after several days of searching, they found no trace of her. In a cruel twist of fate, Chihung's grandfather, Old Master Qi, learned of the incident from a servant and died of anger. In the court, political rivals of Chihung's father used the corruption of family morals as an accusation against both Chihung and his father. Although Chihung's father was secure in his position, Chihung was severely punished. He was demoted and transferred to a lower-ranked position as a county magistrate in Changzhou. He had just become familiar with the administrative duties in Qingzhou, only to be sent to the even more remote and lower-ranking Changzhou. Furthermore, he had to observe mourning for his grandfather for 3 years before resuming work, making the task even harder. The pain was unimaginable. When Yulan told me all of this, she seemed to take some pleasure in it. That Qi official still had the nerve to ask our master to help him? Fortunately, our master is kind-hearted and didn't hold grudges. But Chihung, now he's the laughingstock of the entire capital. He abandoned you back then, and now he's getting his comeuppance. I lowered my head, continuing to embroider my wedding dress, indifferent to these matters. Now, my mind was filled with Zhao Shuyan. A few days ago, when he secretly entered my courtyard to see me, he whispered in my ear, "Chinguan, flowers bloom in all seasons in Huayang. The scenery is beautiful. Would you be willing to see it with me? I only wish for flowers to bloom every season, and for every season to bring happiness." The wedding banquet at the Shun residence was lively. Chun Ning whispered to me, "I never imagined you would become my sister-in-law." After a few days of rest, Zhao Shuyan bid farewell to the emperor and prepared to take me back to Huayang. After tearfully saying goodbye to my parents, Zhao Shuyan and I set out for Huayang. He rode ahead on horseback to clear the way for my wedding carriage. I was leaning against the window, dozing, when I suddenly heard Yulan exclaim, "Miss, someone on horseback is chasing us. It looks like it's Chihung." I didn't react much, just furrowing my brow. Chihung's voice echoed from behind, "Chinghuan, you'll regret marrying him." Chinghuan, look back at me. I pressed my temples. A few days ago, when he heard about my marriage, he tried to force his way into the Shin residence, but I had the servants block him at the door. He had come several times, trying to barge in, but after shouting for a long time without seeing me, he gave up. I didn't expect him to be holding such a big move, following behind my wedding carriage on horseback. It was clear he wasn't up to any good. However, Zhao Shuyan was right in front, and dealing with him wasn't a big deal. I lifted the curtain of the carriage and told one of the guards protecting me, "Go tell the prince that someone is disturbing my rest. Ask him to send people to drive him away, but don't harm him." "Yes, Your Highness," the guard replied and went off. Zhao Shuyan acted swiftly, and soon we no longer heard Chihung's voice. "The prince says that you should rest well, Your Highness. If you're tired, you can take a nap. He has already sent someone to drive him away." I stopped thinking about Chihung and sat quietly, a smile forming at the corner of my mouth. I once asked Zhao Shuyan, "When did you start to like me?" He smiled and stroked my forehead. "Believe it or not, the moment I saw you at the jewelry store, I had already fallen for you. At that time, if I had told you my real name, I was afraid you'd be shy, so I used a fake name to try and find out your name. But you wouldn't tell me. I tried many ways to find out, but I never expected that I would meet you at the palace banquet. I was keeping an eye on Chun Ning, and the moment your maid spoke, I rushed out and saved you. Later, I found an excuse to enter the Shun residence. After hearing your father's endless chatter, I searched like a headless fly for ages, until I saw you sitting under the parasol tree, looking at the Chihung flower. You looked as beautiful as a fairy. At that moment, I thought, when can I pluck the flowers of Yangzhou and place them on this fairy's head? We smiled at each other, and then he continued. I stayed in the capital, not willing to leave. I thought I hadn't won your heart yet, so I didn't dare ask for your hand, afraid of being too abrupt. After your father's troubles, I finally had a reason to stay in the capital. I asked the emperor to allow me to help investigate the corruption case, and finally, I saved your father. Luckily, when I visited your residence that time, I saw from your eyes that I could finally win your heart. I blushed and hit him lightly. I withdrew my thoughts and quietly admired the scenery along the way, feeling at peace. This time, I would finally have a chance to see the flowers blooming in all seasons in Huaiyang. End.